we're looking at some of the most toxic commanders of the olden days and seeing if they're still toxic today.
I'm Mia, and one of my favorite commanders is on this list.
I'm Beezy. I like going outside for some walks every once in a while. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, and our likes didn't line up at all this episode. And we're sponsored by Card Kingdom. Card Kingdom is a website you can go to buy Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and it's also, secondarily, a great place to support the Nitpicking Nerds, because if you use our link and you buy stuff through that link, we get supported and we can eat food.
It's absolutely great on Card Kingdom. They actually have a great sale going on right now, including the Desert Bloom Precon and the Most Wanted Precons are both on sale. And that's just chock full of a lot of value, so go check it out, use our link, tell them we sent you. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
Nerds
at checkout, you can save 5% of your real money tax dollars on your entire order. They have so many awesome sleeves and organizational tools and just ways to carry your cards. Go check them out.
And Moxfield is the sponsor of this video, but not yet. We're going to bamboozle you later with an ad. And if you want to support the channel directly by basically just walking up to us, ringing our doorbell, handing us $5, and going about with your life, in addition to some awesome perks, Patreon is the way to do that. I really buried the lead. But Patreon is a great way to support the channel, in addition to all these other ways. It's just, if you're the Nitpicking Nerd super fan, you want us to audit your decks personally, Patreon's the best place for that. So we're going to have some fun looking at some old boogeyman commanders, and we're going to see where they rank on EDHREC today, how toxic they were in the past, if they still hold up, if they are still as toxic. We're talking about some classic cards in the olden days and some classic cards that are brand new for the deck now.
Some of the things that when Beezy and I started playing Commander, it's like, ooh, they're bringing that out. It's a really serious deck. You better bring your A game. The first one is Derevi, Imperial Tactician. Blue, white, green for a 2/3 with flying. When it ETBs or a creature you control deals combat damage, you can tap or untap target permanent. And if you pay 1 and green, white, and blue, you can put Derevi on the battlefield from the command zone. This cheats out Commander tax, which is why it was one of the big boogeymen back in the day.
Yeah, this is, I was going to compare it to a different commander, but that other commander is also on this list. The fact that you could put this out for 4 made people so salty, and it doesn't hurt that this card's actually just pretty great. Untapping all your lands. If you have even Simic Growth Chamber, just like a bounce land, now you're making 2 every time you untap something because you can respond and tap it again. And it's a lot of little spin your wheels, little move your little buttons and knobs and turn them all and just kind of eventually win. I saw this in Stacks was very common. This was probably one of the go-to Stacks commanders at the time. Derevi was hated. People hated Derevi.
We actually saw a Derevi deck pretty recently. Our friend Mod played one, and they played it on a $50 budget. So you can actually build a lot of these commanders budget now. This is a rank 156 on EDHREC. A little bit higher than I thought, considering that was the only deck I've seen recently with Derevi as the commander.
Yeah, 156 today. That's surprising because I don't know if I've played against Derevi in 10 years. It has been a very long time, and I guess people are out there still playing Derevi, maybe in more of a competitive way.
Maybe. I don't think it's CEDH viable with Blue Farm and that stuff running around, but I do think it is still spicy, and you can build it pretty spicily.
Okay, yeah, we gotta talk about some of these old cards though. Some of the cards you think about, you're like, oh yeah, I could picture a Derevi deck in 2013 with these cards in it. First one, Winter Orb. Remember this fun one? Lands don't untap. You can't play Magic, so this was a common if someone played Winter Orb, Derevi. It's almost like Derevi was one of the original Winter Orb is broken commanders. Now we have Urza these days, but back then we didn't have Urza. We had to do Derevi.
It's just so rude playing Winter Orb, and then also you can tap everybody else's lands. That's just no fun allowed, and I can see why that gets annoying. There's also Birthing Pod. You can go do pod chains and untap Birthing Pod to go find your next biggest and best thing to just get it on the battlefield almost immediately.
Yeah, if you can stack up a few activations of Derevi from the command zone, you can bring it out, untap pod Derevi into something else, and then bring it out again for 4, untap pod, and you could maybe start a chain or maybe just annoy everybody. That's also possible.
It just gets so spicy. I know Birthing Pod is just such a iconic card. It was reprinted in the 30th anniversary because of that kind of iconic status, but I feel like this is one of the biggest places we saw it in Commander back in the day.
I can remember on this channel 6 years ago just hyping up Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod was so much fun in Commander. It was a staple. Everybody played Birthing Pod because you just would okay, I guess I'm baking in a Birthing Pod chain into my deck. And now it's not really a card I think about, but it makes me happy to think about it.
Yeah, when I first started listening about CEDH and stuff, I remember Blood Pod was still a thing, and I'm like, wow. And now you never hear about that.
There was also one of the most boogeyman cards in the 99, Deadeye Navigator. This was paired with like Eternal Witness and blinky effects to like Prairie Drake to untap all your lands infinitely, and then it just kind of works with Derevi. And I'm sure that every Derevi deck, that was sort of like the average. The EDH deck wasn't around that long ago, but every composite average Derevi deck back then probably had like Winter Orb and Deadeye Navigator in it.
I wouldn't be surprised. There wasn't as many ways to share a deck ideas, so all of them seem kind of like homogenous at one point.
Let's look at some cards that are a little bit more recent that make the Derevi shell, that make the Derevi into the 156th most popular commander that nobody's ever seen. We have Emil the Blessed. This is a way to flicker creatures. So if you have a creature that can tap for like more than 3 mana, what you can do is just keep paying 3 mana to flicker Derevi, untap the creature that makes 4 or more, and now you just have infinite mana. And then you have infinite Emil blinks if you have something else going on, and you also have infinite untaps of every permanent and infinite taps of every permanent. So that's probably really hard to beat.
Another boogeyman card of today is Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, because if you have infinite mana, you can just spit out your entire deck with his pay ability.
And also when you're tapping and untapping mana dorks, which Derevi loves and plays a lot of, now they're making extra mana, and it just kind of fuels Kinnan. So they don't necessarily need infinite mana, but he helps just make things really annoying and find those cards. Like if you're still playing Deadeye Navigator or you've got Emil, it just helps find them. It's just so easy to activate over and over.
I can see Derevi being a spicy toxic commander in 2024 if you're putting in things like Kinnan. Preston is also a great one in here because you're just going to be making copies of things that ETB too. That's so annoying.
Like if you wanted to take this into a blink route, I see a lot of Derevi doing like poke you in the face with 4 creatures, combat type annoying little asymmetrical tap and untap things, but you could go like the blink Emil route. Maybe you've got Deadeye in there.
Yeah, I think so too. Regarding toxic ratings, though, I think this is like an 8 out of 10. This is pretty spicy, and people don't like Winter Orb, obviously. It's one of the most hated cards in Commander. So the fact that the old Derevi used to just run that in basically every Derevi list, that makes it pretty toxic and high on the list.
Yeah, it was pretty toxic before. The fact that it was one of the first commanders that just sort of ignored commander tax was really annoying to people, and add in the combos and extra fiddly stuff you can do with it definitely got on people's nerves. As for today, I feel like it's still not the most fun card to sit down from, which is maybe why we don't ever sit down across from it. I might give it a 6 out of 10 right now. I got bigger problems, but I'm still doing this to the Derevi player.
Yeah, it's never great when someone can just cheat their commander tax, and that's always a staple of a kind of toxic commander, but there's been a lot of things printed lately that kind of just bump it up one notch.
Yeah, so speaking of not paying commander tax, what about just never casting your commander ever? Aloro, Ageless Ascetic. Remember this guy? 3 white, blue, black for a 4/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 2 life, and that's also true if he's in the command zone. And whenever you gain life, this is if he's in play, you can pay 1 to draw a card, and each opponent loses 1 life. This card, I promise, this was the most hated commander, not even close, back in the day when he came out, and for a year or 2 after, number one hated. Everybody hated this. It let you stay alive longer. You basically started the game at 60 or 50 or whatever you want to call it, because you just got so many free life gains, and it was just frustrating. Decks were worse back then, and I'm sure everybody collectively was they were worse commander players by nature of not having as much experience. But man, it's funny to look back and think that I hated this card too. I was like, why would they do this? In design, it was a design mistake, and I don't know why they went back to Eminence, because that's what this is. But very funny to think about. Aloro was the boogeyman. It was just Esper, good stuff, life gain.
I think that's pretty interesting because this, as you mentioned, this is pre-Eminence, but they've tried to go back to Eminence twice at this point. That was 2017 and then Sidar Jabari, which each time it's been kind of knocking it down one pedestal to an extent. But somehow this is still rank 41. I haven't seen an Aloro deck in the last, 10 years?
If you play Aloro, just let me know. Tell us in the comments. Aloro players unite. Somebody make a comment and somebody tell us, because I haven't seen Aloro since 2014. I just thought there was new shinier things when the next wave of Eminence came out. People were shocked and why would they go back to this? But nobody was I'm going to build an Aloro deck now.
Yeah, I'm really surprised too, because in 10 years, our boogeyman commanders, it's going to be Turgrid, for instance. Is Turgrid still going to be on the top of the EDH Rex and that sort? I'm just really surprised if this was the definitely don't play against this one,
Yeah. So let's look at some of the old cards that I'm picturing. I've seen Aloro decks, and I used to know people who played them in the past when he came out. I can picture these cards in my hands looking at that deck. Sanguine Bond, the 5-mana enchantment. I mean, it's ubiquitous across all life gain, But let me tell you, this was one of the only life gain payoffs back then for like actually killing people with it. And of course, Exquisite Blood was fairly new at the time, so people put that into.
There's also Soul's Attendant. You want to gain life real fast without your commander? You can just put Soul's Attendant on turn 2 and then just gain life whenever anybody plays stuff. You're going to have like 60, 70 life by the time Allura can even come out.
And then there's also Rock's Faithmender, one of the first life gain doublers, kind of janky, super slow. It just reminds me of this very, very slow format that I used to play where you could basically just do whatever you want for the first 5 turns. And it was much more annoying when your opponent gained 10 life and you weren't just going to kill them with some kind of attack for 1,000,000 play. But yeah, gaining 4 every turn, toxic.
I like how now that's like almost nothing, but there are some new cards where if you still have your Allura deck, people who still run that, they are spicy. One of them is Veto. You'll like Sanguine Bond, but you like it on a creature, but 2 mana cheaper? How about Veto? Plus you can give all your stuff lifelink if you just want to get that life total even higher.
Yeah, there's a Lenda's Hierophant, which like gains life, gets counters as you gain life. You gain life, it gets counters, and then it just dies into 1,000,000 things. That's always nice. And then Shieldred the Apocalypse. Have you heard of this one? If you wanted to see like an updated version of the Boogeyman Commanders, I think we've listed a few of them off already. But yeah, gaining 2 every turn is kind of like what Allura does. It's very similar. It's like, well, every turn I'm going to gain 2 for free, except now also you lose 2.
Well, I was thinking of the fact that if Allura is out and you pay 1 and everyone loses 1 and you draw, you're also going to be gaining extra life.
And then you can actually just keep paying.
Yeah.
That's pretty, wow.
So it's like pretty spicy, right?
I couldn't even be mad at that. That's cool. It's like a non-infinite way to just, one of those.
Yeah, and you just have a ton of cards at that point if you have the mana to supplement that. And so back in the day, life gain used to be a lot better, I feel. And so I think the toxic rate was like 9 out of 10,
Easily, yeah. I think, there's arguments for 9.5 or 10. But I think Allura, everybody hated this guy, and it's great. It was great. I hated him. Everybody was just like, "This is stupid. You built an Allura deck. Like, what, you just want the game to never end? I'm just sitting down in pods. Everybody's playing Allura. I just scooped it up." Those are the stories.
Nowadays, though, I think it's like a 5 out of 10. I feel like Edgar's the most hated Eminence-esque commander nowadays, right?
Yeah, Edgar, and then Ur-Dragon is pretty strong. I feel like people don't hate Ur-Dragon, probably because everybody has an Ur-Dragon deck.
Yeah, but everyone hates Edgar and I feel like if he dropped down to $40 too, people wouldn't hate him as much.
Maybe that's it. Maybe they're just like, I can't afford you, Edgar. I hate you.
But if you want to talk about something that everyone loves, how about Moxfield, the best place online to build decks? We have a Moxfield account. We put all of our decks on there. So if there's anything we've talked about in our personal decks that you want to check out, go check it out there.
I feel like there's maybe a universe or a video in the future that's like our decks ranked most toxic to least toxic, and Moxfield would help with that because it just lets you see everything in a clear way. This is not something you can see on our profile, but if you go to your own profile, you can sort your own decks into folders. So like, deck ideas, things I'm working on. Maybe I'm building the one of every deck challenge, or I want to just have online brews only, and then I have a folder for paper brews. It actually is really useful. It's like the organization I always wish I would have had on Redacted website.
I really like it because I could put my Pioneer deck on there and Arena type decks, and then also all of my Commander decks. It's a great place. And we have the cube on there if you're curious.
We do. We also have another old-ish Boogeyman Commander. This is, 7 years old at this point? It's Yuriko, a Tiger's Shadow, 1 blue-black for 1/3. Commander Ninjutsu, blue-black. That doesn't use Commander text, and whenever a ninja you control hits a player, you flip the top card, and every opponent loses life equal to that card's mana value, and then the card goes in your hand. This was maybe this is one of the reasons Allura wasn't as hated, because all of a sudden they printed this, and this is one of the most design mistakey cards they've ever made. And it was totally fine that they made the mistake, but we still got to deal with it every day.
I mean, Gavin even said it was a mistake, and then I feel like we wouldn't have to deal with it as much if it wasn't reprinted in Commander Masters. I feel like one other place. It used to be kind of expensive, and now it's like $1 or less.
This is rank number 5. So
it's pretty popular.
The hype for Yuriko came, and it hasn't left yet. It's still here. Everyone plays Yuriko. You see it all the time. We played against Yuriko
10 billion times at least.
I'd say if we play 20 games, one of them is probably Yuriko.
I'd say maybe even higher, but there are some old cards that we always see. First one is the Changeling Outcast, the Fairy Seer, or whatever is the 1-drop unblockable, so you can Commander Ninjutsu Yuriko into turn 2.
You might be also familiar with Ornithopter, Commander All-Star.
Oh, of course.
And they also had Brainstorm and Limb Duel's Vault, cards that let you set the top card of your library so that you know what it is. So when you hit with Yuriko and maybe another ninja, you go flip, flip, and it's like a 7-drop and then 8-drop, and you just hit people. We had things like Draco back then. We used Draco. We don't have the fancy newfound technology. We just have a crappy, uncastable 16-mana brick that hits people when we Yuriko.
This is going to rot in your hand, but is it going to do 16 to each opponent? Yes, it is. But new cards. One of them is Shadow of Mortality. This is actually a castable card in Commander that hits for almost just as much as Draco. Draco, by the way, biggest actual CMC in Magic.
I wish that there was a different card that had that title, because Draco is so lame, I feel like. Why can't we give it to Emrakul?
I feel like Shadow's like right up there, though. It might be the second biggest, and that's actually castable because you're going to be losing some life. I feel like all of the Yuriko players, they're like shocking in lands as fast as possible, and they're trying to go, and then it's like, oh, all of you guys are at 28? Well, me too, so don't worry.
Yeah. Also, Gingerbrute, a really annoying addition to this suite of 1 and 0 mana dummies that are really hard to block. I've always annoyed by a Gingerbrute because it means that even after you board wipe, they can't just play like a Herald of Secret Mists, whatever. They can't just play like a 1/1 and then pass. They can play a 1/1, attack you and ninjutsu right away, which only costs at most 4 mana to get this back on the rails, and you just are just like, oh man, come on.
That's power creep, baby. There's also Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion. Have you ever considered maybe just paying life for whatever you flip off the top?
If it's a huge impactful spell, then I could totally see doing that.
Yeah, maybe a big like extra turn spell perhaps to burn out all of your opponents.
Yeah, maybe Time Stretch was an honorable mention too for the olden Yurikos and the new Yurikos. That card has not gone anywhere. As far as toxic rating when it originated, probably a 9 out of 10. I remember this one being, people were pretty annoyed. They realized pretty quick that Commander Ninjutsu should have had Commander tax, and it doesn't, so it's just really hard. Yuriko's basically going to be in play the whole game, and then the sub-game you have to play is stop Yuriko's triggers. You can't stop Yuriko. Just leave her out somewhere or try to enchant her. So I'd say he's 9 out of 10.
Yeah, the first time I saw a Yuriko deck, my friend actually casts a swords on someone's like changeling outcast or something. Like, why would you do that? And he was like, you'll see. And then I did see.
He saw real quick. And then that's funny because I've seen people do not the opposite, but when Yuriko is attacking with a changeling outcast, they'll swords the Yuriko because they're like, well, that's the problem. And it's like, yeah, but you realize really quick that you should have hit the other one.
Yeah, but toxic now, I still think it's like an 8 out of 10. This is still toxic. It is very prevalent, as you see by the number 5 EDH rec ranking.
When I see Yuriko, I know that I can't keep a bad hand. I have to make sure I can interact, and I know that there's going to be some tomfoolery in the first 4 turns of the game.
Yeah, definitely. It's just really spicy, and even if you build a bad Yuriko deck and you just build ninjas or something, you still have a pretty good deck.
Yeah, you don't have to throw 16 mana bricks in. If you just play all ninjas and you don't even worry about the fact that they lose life equal to the mana value, it's still going to be drawing tons of cards, and it's kind of like a built-in win condition. So yeah, Yuriko is pretty annoying, but I think we might need to let this next old Boogeyman go to you, because you have some experience with this commander.
This is my baby. This is Kali of the Vast. 1 white, black, red for a 2/2 with flying. When it attacks an opponent, you can put an angel, demon, or dragon from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking that opponent.
It's pretty strong.
That is spicy. And back in the day, cheating out things that are 7 or 8 mana, and it just comes in tapped and attacking anyway, so that's an extra 8 to 12 damage to the face.
Yeah, here's the thing. Nobody played removal back then. They just didn't do that. So this whole wave of like command zone saying 10 removal spells in your deck, that was like 7 or 8 years ago, and this is before that. So I don't know what people were doing, but they were not removing creatures, and so as a result they were like, when I let Kalia sit and play, I just lose to it. This card just kills everybody. And then Lightning Greaves was still very popular. It was very common to go Signet on turn 2, Kalia turn 3, possibly with a Greaves mixed in there somewhere, and it just was like, I get the feel bads, but I can look back at my old decks and say, yeah, I wasn't equipped as well to handle Kalia.
I mean, I love like angels, and I love the magic artwork basically. So Kalia just kind of brings that all together in like a pretty package of like, dragons are cool, demons are awesome, angels are so pretty. Why not just play all of them and also cheat out some mana? And I think a lot of people agree because this is number 15 on EDH rec.
Today is number 15. It's still one of the most built commanders of all time. Pretty cool. The old cards that you might have seen, Avacyn Angel of Hope was a nice one. Jeez, yeah, Avacyn came out, I think, a year after Kalia, so that was like the perfect fit.
Yeah, it's just the 1-2 punch, even if someone had a Wrath or something, your stuff would be untouchable.
Yeah, and at that point, that was one of the cards that when you're already not playing removal, it comes out, you just feel like the game's over. Speaking of game over, Master of Cruelties, sometimes the game was over for you, right then and there, and I can see how this contributes to the top. This is probably the most toxic Kalia card, just because if it eliminates one person right away, the game is far from over. They can't really do that again because this master is a known entity, and it's pretty awkward to just sit there for 45 minutes.
I actually have this in my CEDH deck because I wanted to build my CEDH deck with the big monsters of yesteryear, but with the spiciness of competitive stuff today. And I was able to do that turn 2, and it's like still really funny.
Yeah, it wasn't me, thank God. I was on the receiving end.
Sorry, Chris.
You're like Jewel Lotus Vamp Tutor or something. And took him out. Chris is editing this video, actually.
We love you, Chris.
He has final say on how stupid we look.
Yeah, but sorry, Chris. Also, we had Whisper Silk Cloak. BZ mentioned Lightning Greaves back in the day, but that's still kind of playable. But Whisper Silk Cloak, I don't think that's playable anymore.
That is not one you see every day nowadays. The new cards, some of the new things, and Kalia's gotten some pretty
upgrades.
Sweet toys. Like we've got Hoarding Broodlord, the dragon that convokes things and tutors. It's so much better than Runescar Demon. Maybe you're playing Runescar Demon, but man, is this an upgrade.
Yeah, you can also just like do really cool stuff with it with like Saw in Half or like Burnt Offering. I know that's a big thing. There's also Ancient Copper Dragon. That's like a $70 dragon.
Surprise, you know? I have made 10 treasures on average and you just took 8.
And it just comes in tapped and attacking, so if they don't have flyers, it's like, okay, well, I have a hand of big mana creatures. I can just play them now.
Yeah, if you hit 15 treasures off of this, you could just go, oh, well, I was going to cheat out this big thing. I'll just play it now. Yeah. And then I'll go tutor something, and then maybe I'll play another thing, and maybe I'll play my Avacyn, Angel of Hope.
Yeah, that's where your Sarah's Emissaries and stuff come in. It's like, okay, what are you going to do now?
Yeah, Sarah's Emissary, another new card that's super strong in this deck, and that sort of rounds out the like Dragon, Angel, Demon thing. I feel like in the before times, before EDH Rec, before YouTube, basically, probably like 8 out of 10, somewhat toxic. You know, pretty up there in terms of how annoying it was for people. I think that was partially on us, but, you know, sometimes you got to take the L.
I think now it's like 6 out of 10. It's still pretty spicy, and cheating out stuff is crazy, but people run a lot more removal nowadays.
I'm surprised you had this at a 6, because I was going to say this is like a 4 for me. If somebody pulls out Kalia, it's like a non-issue. I don't even think about it as like, oh no, I need to prepare.
Well, I don't think it's that, like, I think it's spicy, but it's not super bad. But I do know a lot of people don't run as many flyers as they would like, or as much removal as they might want. And I know that I have a lot of ways to give Kalia, just like make her go very fast and also make her very either indestructible or just hexproof or shroud or whatever. So I feel like those, maybe we could bump it down to a 5. I don't think it's that toxic, but if you disagree with me, like, put it in the comments.
Yeah, I mean, as the removal evolves, the Kalia players can also adapt to that. They go, oh, players have at least 4 more removal spells in their deck on average. Well, I'll just play an extra version of this. I'll get Swiftfoot Boots.
Like, I have Tybalt's Trickery.
Yeah, she has Tybalt's Trickery, so watch out. Okay, this next one, I fortunately have only played against like twice, but I pretty much stayed far away from this. If somebody offered to play with this, I was like, no. Child of Alara. Wooburg for a 6/6 trample. When it dies, destroy all non-land permanents, and they can't be regenerated. This was board wipe kindred. So many people have come up to me or talked to me at the time, where I was like, what are you building? What are you playing? And they were like, this is my board wipe deck. I'm like, what does it do? It wipes the board, and that's it. It just extended the game. I don't know how this became a meme or a trend or anything, but this was all over the place.
I've played against Child of Alara once or twice, and both times it's been like a chaos board wipe deck, and it was really, really weird. But I think it's also, this was like the chaotic type of deck where you can put in door to nothingness. It was one of the only commanders back in the day that you could.
There wasn't as many Wooburg commanders that were like modern. There was some weird old ones like Chromat, but this is when they started doing like, oh, you know, it was I think this was Conflux, and they were like doing multicolored stuff, so we got some Wooburg things. Today this is ranked 288, and I think that's fair. This just sort of faded into obscurity of like, what does this really do for you? Not a ton, because you blow up all your own stuff, so like, there's no cute way to build this. Maybe you could build like all lands, you know, I'm building an all lands deck, I'm going to Field of the Dead you, and I'm going to Valakut you, that's cool, but there's not much to do with, I can wipe the board over and over again. So some of the old cards that people were very, very excited to annoy people with were Reanimate. We let it die, just reanimate it. It comes back. Ta-da! And now I'm going to wipe the board again.
Yeah, it's just going to keep coming back and forth, and you're going to swing in for commander damage because it has trample and 6/6, which is a big amount. But if you need to make it unblockable, Thassa, God of the Sea, was a great one because it was indestructible, and you could just make Child of Alara unblockable, so you could just keep punching in for 6 every turn.
Yeah, I think Child of Alara was like 2009-ish, and then Theros was 2013 maybe? So people were like, when the Gods came out, they could build the Gods deck and put that into child, and that kind of made a little bit of sense because it was a lot of devotion and the gods were cool. So, maybe that's like somewhat passable, and then every time you wipe the board, nothing happens to your stuff because they're all gods. And then Heroic Intervention, you can go that way and just try to build a one-sided board wipe. These are all... These last two, they're kind of merciful because I feel like what I heard the stories was just you played 3-hour games because one person had a Child of Alara deck that they would just kept reanimating it, and they didn't do anything one-sided. They weren't advancing their board. They were just de-advancing everyone's board.
I think so, but also I thought of it as like a Wooburg type commander. You could just make this basically whatever you want, so long as you can either get the Child of Lara back or just get value out of it.
Yeah, you could make it whatever you wanted. So why did everybody, maybe this was you, why did you choose Pain? Why did we all choose Pain back then? I mean, you know what? I don't even want to lock myself in.
You guys didn't run removal, but there are some new cards that could go really well in your Child of Lara deck if you're building it a little bit more merciful, for instance. One of them is Awaken the Woods, because all of the things that you make are going to be forests, which are lands, so they won't get destroyed when Child of Alara blows up.
Yeah, you can lump Ashaya in with that so that all your creatures actually survive the wipe.
Wasn't new enough for me to put on this list, but yeah.
You could also go the other route that's like similar to Reanimate. You could play all of these effects that they've printed recently, the Not Dead After Alls. The targeted creature, when it dies, it comes back tapped or with a thing on it, or you get a sticker, you get a gold star, whatever little small upside it gives you. But this is a way you could stack your whole deck full of these. Malika Rebirth, another one from a set that's too old to mention. And this is pretty annoying. I'd still give this big toxic points.
And if you want to have a non-combat way to win, how about the Meat Hook Massacre? If you're destroying your opponent's boards anyways, then you might as well get a little bit of life off your stuff dying and a little bit of life they lost off their stuff dying.
Olden toxic rating, absolutely 9 out of 10. You're pushing 10 out of 10. You're pushing with these decks that were just memes, like LOL, I wasted your night type. I don't even know how that's a joke, memes.
I think now, depending on how you build it, the max you can get is like 8. Because people still don't like it when you wipe your stuff, but I don't know. If you're building it like maybe lands and you can just swing in for something like really quickly, maybe I'd say like 6 or something. If you have like a bunch of land creatures and then you're like, okay, wipe the board and then kill you all, that's not that bad.
It has the same energy as like a mass land destruction. If you just play a mass land destruction card willy-nilly and the game is extended for another hour, people are going to get mad and not remember that fondly. But if you play a turn 12 Armageddon, but your lands are indestructible and you have 15 creatures in play, okay, we're probably going to die, and that's like much less painful. So maybe max 8 out of 10, but I could see how it could be less these days.
Yeah, I definitely think because it's Wooburg, you can kind of build it however you want. So I think it depends on the route that you take it.
You know what? Shout outs to the internet for this one, because I think people typing like, hey, this wasn't a fun experience, and like, what's a Rule Zero talk? Can we have one of those? That really killed it for Child of Alara.
I do appreciate that. And I'm happy that I think it killed it for the next one too. Grand Arbiter Augustin IV, 2 white, blue for a 2/3. White spells you cast cost 1 less, blue spells cost 1 less for you, and spells your opponents cast cost 1 more.
Simple.
Yeah, and it's annoying. This is just the tax deck, stacks and tax.
Stacks and tax, and LOL, you can't cast your spells, haha, you're going to lose. Very, very toxic. Yeah, just a toxic card. Rank number 152 today, not very high. I can respect that. I would imagine this was top 50, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I remember someone suggesting that to me, and I was like, LOL, that's pretty funny, but also, like, that's a miserable game.
It's not something people enjoy, and as we've played and discovered the format a little bit more, this is one of the first ones that people were like, if I could pick 5 commanders to not play against, Grand Arbiter Augustin IV would probably be on there. And, like, the deck doesn't really have a ton of synergy. It's just, like, cards that stop you from playing so that you can't play, and then you... In a way, they synergize because now you can't play harder. Like, Aura of Silence, I love it, but it's a toxic card. You destroy an artifact or enchantment, but their artifacts and enchantments cost 2 more, so they can't really play the game. And when they finally get their feet under them, if they try to kill the Aura, you respond and kill their best thing.
Yeah, have you ever considered paying 3 for a Soul Ring? I don't know. Or 4, actually.
You should have picked a different card, because that's still a great card.
Well, yeah, but just in general, just that extra tax along with Grand Arbiter's tax, that's just like 3 for each aura and enchantment and just artifact. That's a lot of tax in the long run.
Get a load of this. You ever considered paying 5 mana for a Worn Power Stone? Wow, what a great example.
Yeah.
There's also Propaganda, Ghostly Prison. Now you can't attack me while I'm sort of locking the game down and getting whatever engine I'm eventually going to win with online.
Spell Tithe Enforcer is also one that just completely fits the theme of this deck. You like your spells? No, you don't.
No, you don't. You don't like your spells anymore. As for new cards, we've got like Dauntless Dismantler, shuts down the artifact speed. The production of mana is really hard to do with this, and you can blow up all the like 2-mana rocks eventually if there gets to be too many. Sten can make your spells even cheaper so that you can sort of get something going like that.
And Permission Denied, that's from the Jurassic Park one. And it's just like, how about you guys just don't cast any non-creature spells? Also, you can't have that spell.
This deck has very you didn't say the magic word.
Oh,
vibes.
very big, like, haughty librarian vibes.
What was that guy's name? Dennis, I think it was, from Jurassic Park.
I didn't see Jurassic Park, so sure, whatever you say. Regarding the toxic rating, though, this was a 9 out of 10 back in the day, maybe even 10, depending on what they stack their decks with, because, like, saying you can't play the game is never fun.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, toxic rating now is still a 9 out of 10, and I'm going to give that credit to one card. The absolute mother of I don't know what I'm doing, but this card says win the game, so now I have a game plan. It's Approach of the Second Sun. People just put that in the deck when they don't know what to do, and they realize that all their deck does is slow the game down, or it's like, I didn't finish my homework. What should I do? Just throw Approach the Second Sun, and that'll fix everything.
Especially if you can tutor for it or something. It's just like your emergency like exit button, basically. It's just like, I don't know, we'll draw it eventually, right?
Editor Chris, can you throw a Flex Seal meme of Approach of the Second Sun? Because that's what I feel like. We haven't even really talked about one of the most annoying things that people could do in Commander, and that's tutor over and over and over. And one of the classic OG commanders for that is Zur the Enchanter. 1 and an Esper for a 1/4 flyer. Whenever he attacks, you search for an enchantment with mana value 3 or less, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. He's actually ranked 53 today, so he's not too far down from where he was, but this was a top 10 commander.
I mean, I feel like one of the reasons that this is not lower is because it had that reprint in the Post Malone one. So, yeah, and everyone's like, Posty on a card, and then also this is getting a cool reprint. Why don't we just build it?
And then when I think of Zur targets, it's still the best today, and it was the best back then. You just attack with Zur and you throw Necropotence in play, and you just pay all your life or however much your life you want. Draw a million cards, and there's just nothing they can do anymore. You have too much advantage.
Rhystic Study, too.
Rhystic Study, it's a classic. And Diplomatic Immunity, so that's another classic one. Sometimes before they go for that, they go for the you can't touch Zur anymore card, and then that just guarantees more Zur attacks. This next one supposedly was in Zur decks. It looks a little crusty for me, but Harvest Guard, Alseeds, I guess you throw that out there, and then Zur can't die to blocks, I guess.
Mean, people weren't running removal, so the best they could do was hope for something to swing into it.
Yeah, I guess so.
New cards, though, there are some amazing ones. Idolized from Fallout. You're building this Enchantress, of course, or enchantment heavy, so why not just get +X where X is the number of enchantments you have?
Yeah, this is like you attack with Zur, put out Idolize, then you wait a turn, and then it gets huge.
Undo Spirit Dancer is also an amazing one of recent because you take an enchantment, when it ETBs, you make a copy of it, and now you just have 2 of this stupid broken enchantment.
Yeah, whatever it is just doubling it up, and it gets around some things too.
2 Rhystic Studies?
Sure, why not? I mean, we also have Combat Research. It's one of those like curiosity type effects that you can throw on Zur and just sort of stack them up if you want to. There's a lot of ways to build Zur, and they're all pretty annoying.
Yeah, I think so too. The toxic rating back then was 8 out of 10. I mean, you're going to find the best pieces of your deck, and you're just going to be able to just keep tutoring.
Yeah, I mean, Necropotence is still one of the 2 best black cards in the format, if not number 1. And the gap, I think, between Necropotence and everything else was so much larger back then that it was so much even more annoying when they got Necropotence out super fast. Toxic rating now, I feel like we're at like a 6 out of 10. The board wipes are just so good, and they clown on Zur. The board wipes will humble a Zur player almost no matter what spicy enchantments they get, so that makes me feel a little bit less bad.
I also just, when I think of enchantment decks in general, I'm just like, I fear the green part of Enchantress decks, right? Because that's the enabler of like draw a card, draw another card, draw, and so
the Sithis
so I feel like you're getting less advantage because you don't have green in Zur.
Yeah, I feel like that way too. If you want to see any extra, if there's any toxic commanders we forgot that you want us to do a little evaluation on, just let us know. Drop a little comment, but we're happy to talk to you about toxicity. And if you want to see the most hated commanders in the format right now, probably a good little 1-2 punch, check it out.